Thank you, Sam, and I'm glad everyone's out there. What we're going to do today is talk about HMDA from the audit perspective. Now, this can be used just as easily by those of you who are in charge of either obtaining the HMDA data, you're doing data input, because as we're looking on the audit side, I'm showing you where the common violations are and what to look for. You would use that, again, on your side to make certain that what you're doing is something that's reportable, that you're maybe using the right codes. So today we're going to go through some sections, and I do have, in addition to the outline, I have my own simple work paper, and I've referenced several times different areas such as the HMDA sampling procedures. There's both something that's been out there for a while and Fed. CFPB has their own. It's what's really interesting to me on the CFPB is the HMDA resubmission guidelines. And so those are kind of interesting to look at. And at the same time, they have the sampling procedures. And from there, you go to, you know, if you have more than these violations, now we've got to resubmit. So we're going to go over some of the common areas, things that when I'm doing a HMDA review, that I look for. So hopefully this will help you if you're an auditor, you're an external, you're someone within the bank, and you just want to make certain maybe you're doing some quality control. Maybe you're the person who's responsible for doing the input and you don't really know what you're supposed to be comparing this to. So hopefully this will help. And as Sam stated, please feel free to send on those questions if it's something that's not clear. Since I can't see your faces, I can't always tell if I got my tongue in front of my eye tooth and I couldn't see what I was saying. Maybe I said something backwards. Feel free to ask us those questions. So what we're going to go over today is rate spreads still tend to give us some grief. We're going to talk about the difference between temporary versus short-term. What is a refinancing? We're going to talk about those pre-approval programs. Some of you have them, don't know you do. Some of you don't have them and you think you do. We're also going to talk about applications that aren't originated. So how do I find those? What is it I'm looking for? So those are the things we're going to go over some of that. We're going to talk about spotting potential errors just by looking at the LAR. If you are a regulator, you are mandated to do this random sampling. Well, when I do a LAR review, HMDA review, I do the random sampling, but then I also go back and I do some judgmental, which means I look for specific things that are red flags out there waving at me, say, pick me, because I've got something wrong with me. Or something doesn't look right, and maybe it ends up being okay, but I need to verify it. So sometimes that random sampling won't give those things. So we will talk about how to spot those potential errors and what you ought to be including within your review. Also, we'll talk about how you identify potential HMDA applications from both loan and denial files. So not just looking at the LAR, but then how you might do a selection from both originated loans and those loans that weren't originated to see maybe something that wasn't on the LAR that should have been. Whenever you're doing an audit for HMDA, you ought to be going from both directions. You would make a selection from the HMDA LAR, and then you're going to go back and you're going to look at originated loans and non-originated files, and we're going to pull a sampling of those to see if maybe they were something that should have been reported. So we'll talk about how you do that. We're also going to talk about verifying the data accuracy against the source documents. So I absolutely cannot do a review of your HMDA if all I have is your HMDA input sheet. I have to see the source documents. So for me to be able to tell, first off, whether or not that receive date is correct for the application, I need to see the application or the loan write-up or whatever it is that you use. How do I know whether or not the amount of the loan is correct? I need to go out and I need to look at the actual note. I need to see the application or the GMI form so I know whether or not the monitoring information is correct. I have to look at source documents, and so I give you some suggestions. Also, on the source documents, sometimes there's multiple, and some of those will help you determine some of those, ooh, I don't know if this is black, white, or gray. Which side of the fence is this? And so we talk about some of the documents you can go to verify that information. We're also going to talk about HMDA compliance system because you really cannot do any type of audit or review or monitoring anymore without looking at the supporting compliance system. So the compliance system is, you know, the procedures, the policies you have, who's responsible for handling what. And so there is, as basic as, like with BSA, something that they look for, they being the regulators, that they look for to see, was that bank just accidentally in compliance? Were they just lucky? Do they have a good compliance system to make certain that this is going to always be as well? Or do they need to fix it because it's looking pretty bad? All right, fasten your seatbelts. We are ready to go. Let's talk about those rate spreads. Boy, you think that'd be easy. But it's still not. You know, we do have this wonderful calculator. I have a couple of clients who go out and they figure out the APOR on their own. You know, I like to know I can do that kind of thing. I've tested it, but why would I do that when it's provided to me? And when the provision comes from the regulatory group themselves, in this case the FFIEC, then I'm going to use their tool. I love using their tools because if I use the tools and I use them correctly, I'm not going to get into any trouble. So I encourage you, they still call it the new calc out there. I don't know how they're going to how long they'll call it that. But you go out, and I really, really like my clients who do a screenshot of this. And they either print it and put it in their file, or they've got to scan the image. It's in with their other scans. So I know how they came up with that. Because every now and then I'll see that there's a variance, and I don't know what it was they did differently. And what I do frequently see is that sometimes we use the interest rate instead of the APR. And so I need to see how they've rounded it, what they're looking at for the maturity, whether or not it's a first or subordinate lien. And so that helps a lot to see this. So when we're doing the rate spreads, you know, and the same thing, I do my own rate spreads calculation when I'm doing my audit. And if there's a variance, again, I do a screenshot, and that goes with my work papers. So I don't have to remember, well, the difference was I thought it was a 15-year term, and they did it as a 30. They rounded differently, first versus subordinate, because I've got it right there. So one of the things that we're going to look at when we're looking at rate spreads, the tips here is that you're going to look for spreads with either of the following. You want to see, and these are the ones that's easy to spot. If I have a rate spread with an occupancy code of 2, a 1 means that it's my principal residence. A 2 is not occupied as principal residence. Now, this could be all right with the rate spread because it could be that's my vacation home or my secondary home, or that the purpose of the loan was for a consumer purpose. Therefore, I do have an APR. But you want to look at all of those, or at least not all of them, excuse me, I shouldn't say that. You want to look at as many of those as fit into your criteria for your sampling procedures, that you have some of those, because you want to make certain that they are indeed an individual, that it is someone's secondary vacation home, or that the purpose of the loan was covered under truth in lending. Because what I see occasionally is that we get that mixed up, and this will be an, let's say it's a loan that has, I don't know why I'm drifting, a rental property, non-owner occupied rental property. And so, yes, I'm an individual, but this is for my rental property, so whether it's for purchase, it's a refinance, or it's for home improvement, that it's going to be an occupancy code of 2 because I am an individual, but that is not covered by Reg Z. Non-occupied rental housing is exempt. Now, some of you out there just automatically go ahead and do a truth in lending, which is fine. But according to HMDA, if it is not covered by Reg Z, you should not have anything in that field. It should be in A because it's not covered. So just because you calculate one doesn't mean that that's what goes there. So that's one of those little, I want to go back and check that. Also, if I have applicant codes, if I have a rate spread and an applicant code of 474, which means not applicable, which is going to be those that are not natural persons, it's an entity of some sort, well, then if it's not a natural person, it shouldn't be covered by Reg Z. Therefore, I'm not going to have a rate spread. So that's something that will trigger, say, I need to go and look at those. Those, I think you should look at all of those. Also now, here we are looking at rate spreads, I recommend that you go and identify some of those arm transactions. Now, right now, it doesn't tell us on the LAR whether this is an adjustable rate loan or not. that's